Well, we're in the second half of our look at African and Caribbean religions. The entire series is called Cults and the Occult. We're focusing on African and Caribbean religions. Now, I've touched on a few of them already in the first half of our lesson. This second half, I want to focus in on one particular occult practice, and that is Haitian voodoo. Those of us, of course, we live in South Florida, and if you live in South Florida, I would say it's virtually impossible to not know someone who is Haitian. If you're not Haitian already, it would be almost impossible to not know someone who is Haitian living in South Florida. And so, obviously, the talk of voodoo comes up in conversations and so on and so forth. Haitian voodoo is a syncretistic religion that is mainly associated with Haiti, even though it evolved in the West Indies and has spread to other countries in the last 2 centuries. It is so integrated into the lives of the Haitian people that it has produced cultural trends with voodoo music, voodoo dance, voodoo art, and a voodoo festival, like in New Orleans, Louisiana, that promotes more jazz music than voodoo belief. Voodoo, as described by the Haitian scholar Gerdys Florent, is a, quote, religious system and way of life of the Haitian people, end quote. Voodoo is practiced to maintain health and personal well-being. To achieve this end, voodooists established and maintained contact with cosmic entities they call Loa. The Loa, or Loa, are disembodied spirits, deities that may be classified as either good or bad in practice, but in voodoo basic theology remain essentially neutral. Loas also act as intermediary spirits that can communicate to the voodooist an occult experience that reinforces the reality of the existence of Loa and the validity of voodoo. The West Indies branch of voodoo took root immediately upon the arrival of African slaves brought to the island plantations in the early 18th century to work the vast sugarcane fields. Although forcibly baptized into the Catholic Church, the language, culture, and religious barriers preserved the basics of African tradition. Plantation owners found they could not communicate Catholicism in its fullness, and so the slaves received only fragments of doctrinal truth, pieces they used to disguise the remnants of their culture. In the end, the slaves found a measure of relief by hiding under the quasi-Catholic umbrella, secretly adapting their beliefs to fit the Catholic mold, and giving birth to what would come to be known as Caribbean voodoo. In 1805, the Haitian government lent fuel to the voodoo fire when it sided with Napoleon against the Pope, who promptly withdrew his support from Haiti, stripping the small island of virtually all Catholic priests for almost 2 generations. And by the way, in 1860, the Pope signed a concordat granting Haiti an all-French clergy. The absence of Catholicism coincided with revolutionary times in which many slaves were freed physically and religiously, most using their newfound liberty to explore and solidify voodoo beliefs. I'm going to be quoting from a number of different periodicals and books here. People have done far more research on the topic than I have. There is one book called The Supernatural, written by Douglas Hill and Pat Williams. They write in their book, they say, quote, a further reason for the preservation of the slaves' religion can be found in Haiti's social and economic background. In the centuries that followed their arrival, generation after generation of Haitians continued to live the same harsh and comfortless existence as their slave forefathers. The population of Haiti today is one of the densest in the world, and so the struggle to earn his living from his meager and infertile plot condemns the Haitian peasant to a lifetime of back-breaking labor. Add to these ills of poverty and hard work the dreaded diseases, such as malaria, tuberculosis, and hookworm, are rife in Haiti, and it is easy to understand the powerful appeal of a religion such as voodoo, end quote. And that's a good point. When people are downtrodden, when people are oppressed, remember, God created us to worship. And so people are going to tend to want to go to the supernatural, the spirit world, to try and draw some kind of power, some kind of relief. And in the Caribbean, one of those outlets that many have gone to look forward to is, of course, voodoo. Now, Dr. Walter Martin, he writes as well on the topic. He writes, this syncretism of the African tradition and the Catholic faith throughout the Caribbean produce an altogether new entity. Ancestral worship and veneration ruled at the heart of it, as did the spirit gods brought from Africa. In Caribbean voodoo, it is the family that is the loci, or the path and vitality, not an institutionalized church. The family is responsible for the practice of voodoo. There is no professional seminary, trained priesthood, as in Catholicism. So the religious authority figure is the head of the family. He or she presides over the others. The following voodoo song reflects the centralization of the family, and this is how it goes. This is the lyrics of the song. The family is gathered. Oh, yes, we are gathered. The family is assembled. He should not be alone. Serving the loi, the family is assembled. Martin continues, the similarities present in most voodoo cults paint a picture of their basic cosmology. The complexity as various strains of voodoo creates difficulties for anyone wishing to categorize individual strains as either orthodox or divergent. Joseph M. Murphy, professor of theology at Georgetown University, points out, quote, while there may be informal ties among neighboring voodoo communities, each congregation sets its own standards in matters of ritual and belief. Practices of one congregation may be unknown in another, and what is kept rigidly separate in one community may be brought together in another, end quote. And so the point is, you can say about whether it's about Catholicism or even Protestant churches, so on, the Protestant religion, you may say, well, people go to where? Seminary. They go to seminary, they go to Bible college, so on and so forth. Well, who's the seminary professor in voodoo? Well, there is no such thing. There is no such thing. It's not even so much even that even people gather together as a church. It's all centered around the family. It's family-oriented, with the head of the family being, in essence, the priest. Okay? Nichols, Mather, and Schmidt, they write in their encyclopedic dictionary, they say Christianity and voodoo subscribe to two entirely different worldviews. Most basic to their differences is that the former is strictly a monotheistic religion, while the latter is polytheistic and or animistic. In most voodoo cults, belief in a supreme deity is professed. This deity, however, must share a place with the multitude of subservient loas within the pantheon. Where Christianity has had an impact, missionaries have encountered difficulty in conveying that the God of the Bible is sovereign Lord of the universe and shares his deity and attributes with no other. Syncretistic in orientation, voodoo readily absorbs Christianity into itself. Roman Catholic saints are incorporated into the cultus as well, and each is assigned a respective role in the pantheon. Voodoo worship centers around a temple. Located in the center of the temple is a sacred pillar called a poteau-mitan. Lavishly decorated with icons and artwork, the poteau-mitan is the focal point of the ceremony, the place where communication between God, or the gods, and human beings initially takes place. Dances, rituals, and sacrifices are conducted in the areas surrounding it. On the floor surrounding the poteau-mitan are decorative drawings called veves, on which sacrifices are performed. Each loa has its own veve. So you have these various deities, or as the authors put it, loas. Really, they try to pluralize them. But these deities could be anything from agriculture to a rainbow to a serpent, those found in cemeteries, the sea itself, different kinds of warriors, a certain creator, and on and on and on. There is no one supreme being. There are just many gods. Dr. Martin continues, he writes, Voodoo draws upon the power of the occult to influence every aspect of human life. Some cultures attribute great power and authority to voodoo priests or priestesses, power that allows them to create zombies from the disobedient and mete out punishment. A zombie is a living person whose mind has been altered by drugs or poison, and in a state beyond personal control, is directed toward the purposes and aims of the baka. Based on a sliding fee scales or simply the whim of a priest, these individuals, sometimes called sorcerers, hold the lives of communities in the palms of their hands. Modern voodoo believers often try to dismiss such stories as lurid Hollywood myth, but hard evidence has been produced by many reputable sources to support the existence of voodoo's occult practices and the deep fear they engender. If you ask Haitian people about how voodoo is used in Haiti in particular, and how it is used to either control people or to scare people, Haitian people will explain exactly what Dr. Martin just said. Nichols Mathers, they write, one of the important features of voodoo is the concept of divination. With the use of Wangan, the Hugan conjures up benevolent spirits or good luck. The Hunga conversely uses a paquet for bad luck, a curse, or even retribution resulting in death. Evil or erring spirits are called bakas and ezitos. Candidates for initiation into voodoo receive instruction from the Hugan or Mambo. The initiate undergoes several stages. There is the cleansing process, known as lave tete. Following this are the fire ritual, or konzo, the study of the peculiar language, deities, and loas of the cult, and miscellaneous aspects of the ceremony such as dance, rhythms, and symbols. It usually takes 6 months to 3 years to complete the initiation process. Notice one of the things that's used in there is divination. And what does God have to say to the children of Israel through the prophet Moses, Deuteronomy 18? Deuteronomy 18, beginning verse 10. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord, and because of these detestable things, the Lord your God will drive them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God. So we can go ahead and say that, does Haiti's history go back thousands of years? Of course not. But the occult goes back thousands of years. And so what you're seeing coming out, let's call it Caribbean voodoo, it's not anything new. It has been around for thousands of years. For the most part, it was contained in one continent, Africa. But when the slave traders came, as I explained in the last lesson, then the occult got out and spread throughout all of the Caribbean, and now it's even spreading out into the West, into North America and beyond. Martin continues, he writes, the full expression of voodoo worship comes through dance, song, and ritual drums, all of which have been routinely misinterpreted by outsiders. The dance forms a connection and communication between the participant and the spirit world, especially during rituals and ceremonies. Voodoo theology contains hundreds of spirit gods, too numerous to list, some of which represent nature, such as the sea, forest, plants, water, rainbow, storms, animals like the serpent, and departed humans. In voodoo's union with Catholicism, the saints are represented through the Loa, although the Loa inclusiveness spans a vast arena for the departed. Dreams and trances are thought to be the communication line for Loa, which comes through the individual soul. The soul, as an English translation of ange, has two parts, the greater and lesser. The division, called, quote, the big good angel, is the psyche and intelligence of the conscious mind, and the quote-unquote little good angel is the subconscious mind, the conscience that criticizes individual thoughts. It is the quote-unquote little good angel that communicates with the Loa in trances and dreams. Quote, the relationship between devotees and Loa is thought to be a contractual one. If one is scrupulous in the performance of offerings and ceremonies, the Loa will be generous in their aid. If one neglects the Loa, one cannot expect their favors and even risk their wrath. It is widely believed that neglect of one's Loa will result in sickness, the death of relatives, crop failure, and other misfortunes. In this respect, voodoo is a personal religion. Relations with the Loa are first and foremost an individual responsibility, end quote. Nichols and Mathers and Smith, they write, the evil magic of Haitian voodoo has been a source of intrigue and superstition. Using dolls in order to harm an intended victim is still practiced, but there are other less familiar workings. Participants use various potions and incantations to bring harm or death to a person. The most feared and dreaded working of black magic is known as the, quote, sending of the dead. In this spell, the Boko is possessed by Baron Samedi, who, speaking through his mouth, orders the client to go to a cemetery at midnight with special offerings of food. There he must gather a handful of earth for each person whom he wishes to kill, which he later spreads on some path frequently taken by his victim. Alternatively, a client takes a stone from the graveyard, which will transform itself into a being, ready to carry out his evil designs as soon as he throws it against the door of his victim's house. Whoever has become the prey of one or more dead people sent against him begins to grow thin, spit blood, and is soon dead. The laying on of this spell is always intended by fatal results unless it is diagnosed in time, and a capable Hugon succeeds in making the dead let go. So you understand, it's unfortunate, but when we talk about a nation, and you have seen this throughout history, a nation, not just an individual, not just a family, when we're talking about a nation which adopts, a nation which envelops and welcomes the occult, there are always going to be consequences. And it's always going to bring on the wrath of God. Listen to Micah chapter 5, verses 12 and 13. The Lord tells Israel, I will cut off sorceries from your hand, and you will have fortune tellers no more. Israel was involved in the occult. I will cut off sorceries from your hand, and you will have fortune tellers no more. I will cut off your carved images and your sacred pillars from among you, so that you will no longer bow down to the work of your hands. So understand, we live in a culture. Aside from Haiti, we live in a culture that has turned its back on God. We live in a materialistic culture, in a decadent culture. Less and less people are going to church. Less and less people even care about God. And our government isn't helping by refusing to acknowledge anything that could be demonic in nature. They have no answers. And so, at this point, even in the West, aside from the African and the Caribbean, the occult has nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. we must keep in mind there is no redemption for the demons. And so they understand that their end is not only near, but it is certain. 1 John 4, beginning in verse 1, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Yeshua the Messiah has come in the flesh is from God, and every spirit that does not confess Yeshua is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, of which you have heard that it is coming, and now it is already in the world. And understand, again, for the most part, these particular occult practices was contained in a continent. When the slave traders came and started taking men and women and children, and remember, the occult priests, all that for the most part had been contained in a continent, got out. And it got out and it spread throughout the Caribbean, into South America and Central America, and folks, it's coming into North America. There is an influx of migrants flooding over a wide open southwest border. Wide open. These people aren't coming and crossing that border, coming to America to try and hear the gospel. And they're not coming for the most part to even create a better life, and they're certainly not coming to create a better America. What are they bringing with them? They're not bringing the gospel with them. More often than not, they're bringing these kind of traditional African, Caribbean religions with them. And so what many have brought into the United States, especially over the last several decades, and what the United States has stood for the first 200 years, is two totally different things. And unfortunately, you're going to see, I think, as the years go on, these two entities, what the United States has always stood for, which is on the Bible, and what is being brought into the country, which are all these occult-like practices, they're going to come nose to nose with each other. Nichols, Mather, and Schmidt write, Voodoo's popularity has spread far and wide beyond Haiti, including the United States. Newspaper articles include cases of voodoo practice. Now let me interject. This is a rather dated book that I'm quoting from. But once you hear how dated it is, if the situation was that bad 40 years ago, you can only imagine how bad it is now. Listen, the Toronto Star on April 6, 1983, so that's over 40 years ago, reported that, quote, an estimated 3% of Hispanic Roman Catholics surveyed in a 2-year study by the Archdiocese of New York practice voodoo or spiritism. Again, that was 40 years ago. And if 3% of Hispanic Roman Catholics are practicing voodoo, what do you think that number is now? The December 1981 issue of Newsweek included the following story, quote, you are leaving the United States, reads the sign marking the entrance to Oyotunji, an African enclave in Beaufort County, South Carolina, founded by 18 disaffected American blacks in 1970. The village now boasts a population of 172. One resident calls it, quote, the only place in America where a black person can truly discover his identity. But Oyotunji has drawn criticism from both state authorities and Native Africans. The village founders wanted to return to the tribal lifestyle of the ancient Yorubas of Nigeria. They adopted the Yoruba language and dress and built huts with no electricity or running water. Villagers also practiced the Yoruba religion, voodoo, complete with oracles, ancestor worship, and animal sacrifice. An early morning visitor may find the remains of a chicken or goat still impaled on an altar. Most of the residents subsist on food stamps and tourist dollars. Their leader, Detroit-born King Abba Sejima Adufumni I, a.k.a. Walter King, recently started a school to initiate people into one of 12 African priesthoods for a fee of $1,250. So, hey, he's making money off the whole deal. But think of this. So you have a town, and that was 40 years ago, where people have signs up in South Carolina saying you are leaving the United States. So when you talk just recently of Springfield, Ohio, and there have been reporters, good reporters, that have made their way to Springfield, Ohio. Here is a town that at one point had 50,000 people, Springfield, Ohio. The American government dropped 20,000 Haitian migrants in that city. And for all intents and purposes, the city, according to the residents, not the news crews, according to their own residents, that city has been destroyed. They have brought everything that we have been talking about here in this lesson with them. Everything. But don't think that those who practice voodoo, Caribbean voodoo, are just a bunch of poor Haitians. No, not at all. You don't have to be poor to practice voodoo. Dr. James Gardner wrote an article in the Anaheim Register. This is what he wrote, quote, "The world is a world of spirits. Our lives, our bodies are insignificant. We are a moment in time and space. We're here to honor the traditions of the past and lay the groundwork for the future. People become ill when they fail to honor their ancestors. The witch doctors help eliminate the pain by putting their patients back in contact with the spiritual world. There were a number of incidents where the receiving of messages from my ancestors made profound and significant differences in my life." Gardner told of a time when he was driving at night in the South African desert. He said he had 10 minutes worth of gas left in his car, but the nearest city was 2 hours away. An impulse told him to turn off onto a side road that seemed to lead nowhere. Gardner said, quote, "It turned out a gas station was several 100 yards down the side road. The station should have been closed and the place should have been deserted, but there just happened to be a night watchman there and he agreed to sell me some gas." Gardner said he had other examples too personal to reveal. He said messages from his ancestors help him trade on the stock market. Quote, "I trade thousands of shares every day and I've never lost money on a stock deal." Gardner said the stock market messages are spiritual signs of approval for his living a good life. He knows where he goes astray, Gardner said, because he becomes ill or suffers injury. It was also in South Africa that Gardner began undergoing a midlife crisis of sorts, he said, and decided to ease out of his psychology career, end quote. So, does that sound like someone who's living in some kind of hut and on a dirt floor? No. He had a psychology career. He's a successful individual practicing voodoo. Commentators conclude there are a number of cults within voodoo in Haiti today. It is futile to attempt to name or classify them. In the religious and sociological matrix of this unique area of the world, the religious syncretism has even become a chief tourist attraction. Popular forms of voodoo are exploited in such main tourist cities as Port-au-Prince. Religious wares and artifacts have proved to be a substantial source of revenue, but far removed from the tourist and cash registers, deep within the heart of the Haitian countryside, in the towns and villages scattered throughout this beautiful, yet poverty-stricken tropical island, voodoo magic, ceremonies, and rituals flourish as popularly now as they did centuries ago. In closing, to our look at African and Caribbean religions, Dr. Martin writes, there exists today the divine spirit of truth and its potent counterpart, the spirit of error. Christianity founded on the Word of God and traditional religions steeped in the occult cannot both be right. Someone is wrong, and Christians had better be prepared to demonstrate reasons for their faith. The church has been deluded for many years into believing that all we must do to discharge our obligation as Christians is to go out into the world and tell people that Jesus loves them. Once we have done that, we think we have accomplished our task. But this is not New Testament theology, and it did not originate from the Holy Spirit. If you read the New Testament, you will discover the amazing fact that almost half of it is an apologetic document. The men speaking were speaking in defense of the faith, giving reasons for their belief in Jesus Christ. We believe in Christ. We believe in Yeshua the Messiah. He said, John 14:6, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And that is a very unpopular message now. When you go to anybody, unfortunately, in American society today, most people, and all you have to do is say the name Jesus. The thing that they're going to think in their mind is probably a long-haired hippie. He probably is rather weak-looking. He's undernourished. He's not wearing tzitzit like a good Torah-observant man would, and he just loves everybody. But is that the Yeshua of the Bible? Matthew 23:33, Yeshua said, you serpents, you brood of vipers, how will you escape the sentence of hell? Yeshua was not weak. The Jesus, perhaps, of the Catholic Church might be weak, but the Yeshua of the Bible isn't weak. And we, the believers, we better get on board and start learning our Bibles better. Matthew 25:41, Yeshua said, then he said, all will say on those on his left, depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. That doesn't sound like someone who's weak. That doesn't sound like someone who just loves everybody. We're going to have an issue. Believers in this country are going to have an issue. And we're going to have to come nose to nose with it eventually, and we won't be able to hide from it any longer. People that are going to be in the occult, that are coming into the country, and many who are already here, are going to be viewed as oppressed people. Why do I say that? There's the acronym, LGBTQ. Well, they're adding some letters onto that, but they also added a number. LGBTQ2. 2. No one ever asked what's the 2 for. The 2 stands for two spirits. An indigenous identity. It's a religious marker. 2 Corinthians 4:3 and 4. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, in whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Messiah, who is the image of God. Our society that has rejected God, that has rejected his Messiah, our society, our culture, which is descending even more into darkness, even more darkness, even more darkness. Those of us who are speaking the truth, that message is going to be very unpopular. And there's an influx of the occult that is coming into the country, and people are embracing it. Hebrews 13, verses 12 and 13, therefore Yeshua also, that he might sanctify the people through his own blood, suffered outside the gate. So, let us go out to him outside the gate, bearing his reproach. The message that we will be delivering, if we stick to the truth, is not going to be very popular. But he was reproached. But he was rejected. It is only an honor and a privilege if we declare the truth and we are rejected as well.